Good evening. We apologize for the lateness. We had the equipment arrive late today. This evening is a workshop meeting, and workshops are those occasions where we have the opportunity to have the superintendent and her staff present to us on different aspects of our operation. And it's an opportunity for us to become educated about different things and to engage in dialogue among ourselves. Tonight's presentation will be on our community schools model, and it's actually the unveiling of a new model that we will be introducing, so I will turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Chairman Flores. Good evening, everyone. And you said it right. It is an unveiling and an opportunity to engage in dialogue and question and answer, and really, continue to think about making the framework better. And so I'm gonna call up Nushet Blackburk and Dr. Vasquez Matos to be on hand, given that not only is this an opportunity for us to learn about the framework and how it relates to our district model of excellence, but there are also, as we always know, financial budget implications to the work. And so we're very deep into this work while we also develop our budget to ultimately present to you in the months ahead. So again, before Ms. Blackburk takes over the presentation, just kind of grounding us on the fact that, I don't have the clicker. Can I have the clicker? Thank you. Oh. Yes. Okay, so I was gonna go into our, just so that I can ground us into where it aligns to the work in terms of the DME. Thank you. Thank you. So just grounding us in one of our 4 priorities, and the focus for tonight is around the family and community partnership priority. And as we seek to strengthen the relationships with our families and our businesses, our CBOs, our faith-based groups, we have identified 2 strategies as part of our district model of excellence. One is to implement a holistic community school model, and the other strategy is to develop effective partnerships. And so while the bulk of the presentation is going to be around the framework for community schools, I've also asked Ms. Blackburk to give an update as to the work of the office, given that this was the newly developed office this year. And the major goal here is to increase the number of community schools in each zone. And just to take us back a few months as to a conversation that we had around, initially the goal was for every school to be a community school. And when we started developing the strategic operating plan, we had the commitment to having every school become a community school. We still do, and it is our hope that when we review the framework, you will see how we've actually landed in the same place that we started, with every school becoming a community school. So I am going to turn it over to Ms. Blackburk, and I know that Christina has to go to the other presentation. Yes. Is that okay? Okay, I was just checking. So questions will come as you go through the presentation. So feel free, everyone, to just ask the questions as we go along instead of waiting.
All right. Well, thank you and good evening. I think it's on. Yes? Pull it closer. Okay. That better? All right. All right, well, thank you again and good evening. Also want to make mention that our team is here, the Office of Outreach, Engagement, and Partnerships. They are also here at the board workshop, so just wanted to give a special shout out to the team that makes it happen each and every day. All right. So I wanted to begin by just highlighting a few things currently taking place in the office, and I'll begin with talking about 4 points. Our partners who have been contracted to work with the Office of Outreach to really help us ground the office, look at how we are working, and also looking across the district at the way we are implementing the work on the ground. So they are beginning with a comprehensive needs assessment, and so far they've met with our entire office, they've met with teachers, other community stakeholders and principals. They are scheduled to meet with the family staff in all of our schools, the FRAs and the school family support providers, and other partnership tables. I know they've also had a conversation with the superintendent as well as the deputy superintendent, and I believe they've spoken with board members. So they're trying to ensure that they have a good perspective of what is taking place in the district and using that information to inform their needs assessment. And then the next step would be giving us a report and next steps to inform the office as well as the work that needs to be done on the ground. Additionally, another key highlight would be that we have established a volunteer protocol and an online application process for that. We did hear from families as well as other individuals in the community that they want to be in our schools. They want to be able to volunteer, but they also wanted to have that process streamlined. We do not want anyone to feel like the process is cumbersome because we're trying to exclude them in any way, shape, or form. So that volunteer process and protocol, you can go out to the website, look under volunteer, and it's right there for you. In addition to that, we all know that at times partners will reach out to schools directly. Partners and other CBOs will contact the district and want to be a part and do work in our schools. But given the Office of the Child Advocate report, we want to make sure that, of course, volunteers are cleared, as well as anyone coming into our schools, they have a signed formal memorandum of understanding. So we formalized that process and made sure that everyone understands very clearly what steps have to be taken to have that MOU signed. So just wanted to share with you that this also is up on our website, and it's a simple flow chart that any partner, any CBO, or potential partner, should I say, they can go out and see what the steps are that they need to take. So asking that question, are you interested in partnering or providing programming at Hartford Public Schools? And it takes you step by step what you need to do and what the end result would be. And again, this was something that we heard from partners that came up time and time again. It takes too long to get through the MOU process or the volunteer process, so we tried to streamline that and have quicker turnaround. Another piece that I wanted to highlight, and I'm sure everyone has seen this particular document, it's our communication and customer service contact card. And again, working with the Office of Student Supports as well as the Office of Communication, we just created this contact card that's been distributed to schools, families, to other CBOs to take you step by step on how you go about having a question answered, or if you need to contact someone at your school if something should arise. Really wanting to encourage families and individuals to start at their school to have their questions answered and then move through the protocol. So just wanted to share that with all of you. All right, other highlights. So we reinstated the professional learning sessions that were taking place with our FRAs and our school family support providers. And we did that to ensure, as family work is a district priority, we want to make sure that our frontline staff, that they're also receiving professional learning and receiving tools to help them with their own practice and craft in our buildings. So we've covered topics related to our district model of excellence, FERPA, McKinney-Vento, the volunteer process, and really looking at family engagement as a practice. So we will be going through the newly released protocol from the State Department of Education and also working to develop our own family engagement toolkit that we would like to have completed and released by the end of this school year to be fully ready for implementation at the beginning of school year 2019-2020. We've also looked at home visits and customer service training, and the next session for them actually takes place tomorrow, and they'll be talking about budget and attendance. So really wanting to hone in on our frontline staff in our schools to ensure that they're receiving the information they need to work with our families. In regards to new partnerships, we've partnered with UConn, YWCA, and still in the process of formalizing and adding Amazon, but we're right at that point that Amazon will be a new partnership. You ask, how has UConn come on as a new partner? UConn has reached out to our office and told us that they would like to work with select schools across our zones in various ways. So they would not be coming into our schools to do academic components, but they would like to enrich and offer field trips and other events like that with selected schools. The YWCA, they established a new partnership. They are actually at Parkville School and will be looking to expand to other schools through out-of-school time efforts. And Amazon, everything is kind of on the table right now. And once that is formalized, I'll be sure to share that with the board in our Family and Community Engagement Committee. Lastly, we were awarded a McKinney-Vento grant again. That is an award that comes out every 3 years, and we're just happy that we received that through the State Department of Education. It really does support our homeless and displaced families here in our district. Another topic that just really want to highlight are the roles of the school governance councils in our school. Each week, Carla Cruz, who is not with us tonight because she's representing our office at a training for families that's working with school governance councils. So that's happening with HBOE, one of our partners at the Lyceum. But each week, she does give a status update on SGCs and how they are functioning in our schools. So as of March 1st, we have 17 schools that are in full compliance, so there are no vacancies on their SGCs. 19 schools that are effective but not fully compliant. They may have 1 or 2 vacancies, and then we have 7 that are not in compliance with 5 or more vacancies. And this is something we monitor very closely because we understand the role of the SGCs and want to ensure that those tables are functioning and supporting the work in each school. As far as trainings, this past year, our SGCs, they've received training around the roles, responsibilities, budget training. Upcoming March 14th, they'll be looking at the budget one more time, as well as the parent compact. And then we'll be going back to the principal interview process and then training on the school improvement plans.
I do have a question. The parent compact, what is that?
So
I know what it probably is, but I didn't know we had is a district-wide compact?
So that is actually part of the training, and I know that we'll be working with our chief of schools to look at what will the parent compact be for Hartford Public Schools. I know in the past it's been very individualized to each school, but as we're trying to align and really look across our district to ensure that each school is functioning in similar ways, especially as it relates to family work, that's a conversation that we'll need to look at further to say, this is what our parent compacts will be for Hartford schools.
Mm-hmm. So it hasn't been identified yet, Ms. Brody, in terms of what the framework is. We really wanted to engage with parents as to what they think it should
Look like.
entail. And also, obviously we have our ideas as well, but we wanted to have a step back and have a dialogue first. So I anticipate that this will be an ongoing
Yes, it will
conversation.
be. And again, I shared our chief of schools because we recognize that that's also important, to have several departments working together on that. So.
And I just asked because in the past, it has been some schools that have a parent compact, but it's something that could be used against a parent. So that's what I'm asking.
Correct. And exactly what you are sharing, that's why we want to have a broader conversation. I know in the past it has been this, you have to sign on the dotted line type situation to kind of use to hold parents accountable, but in a negative way. And I don't believe that's what we're looking to do.
And so my interest is in having a shared, the only word that comes up is like accountability, but yes, a parent compact, but like a district compact, right? There are things that we are also want to have agreements about, not just from our families, but also from us, right, as a district as well. And so just making sure that that's a distinction that we make, because I think most of us have experience with a specific parent compact. Yeah.
Yes. And the only
So
thing
broader definition, I guess, is what I'm referencing.
And the only thing I would add to that is when we talk about the dual capacity, I think the parent compact is an excellent example of that. Is just making sure that it's informing on both sides. So, okay. All right. So our Welcome Center, we know that they have been long-standing in our district, doing amazing work. The Welcome Center has now started offering their own family learning sessions in the Welcome Center to families, and would look to move those Welcome Center learning sessions out to schools in the near future. Wanted to also share that they have processed 4,669 intakes to date, including transportation, special education, homeless, uniform assistance, safety transfers, new enrollments through the Welcome Center. I'm just going to, okay. So if you look at this graphic that's also included, you will see that, of course, the peak is August. Of course, school is opening, so July and August are usually the highest months, but it's pretty, looking across September, October, a small dip in November and December, but you can see that each month it's steady. It's steady in the Welcome Center. And they really are doing great work there. And they provide families with information and resources to support their children, ongoing solution-based services to the families. The only other thing I wanted to add to that is in the Welcome Center, day to day, they really can't say it's going to be a high day or a low day. They just always kind of have to be ready for what kind of shows up in the Welcome Center each and every day. And they do an amazing job of really making sure that families receive services that they need when they show up in the Welcome Center. I like to tell everybody that that's like the front door of the district. And when families come in, regardless of what is needed, if a family shows up at 3:55 and says, we were just burnt out of our home, we need to be put up for the night, the ladies that work in the Welcome Center, they're going to see to it that they receive the services they need and the students are where they need to be.
So I just want to highlight just some kudos for the team around, our move to mine the data. It's where we want to go, not just, in our schools, but in all of our departments, right? Looking at our data to really identify the trends so that we can be proactive and be ready if we know that, we have specific spikes. And then to make the connection, for example, with the Office of Schools. Or perhaps the Office of Academics if needed based on those trends. So it's very important for us to continue to mine the data, and so I'm glad that we're having those conversations.
You spoke of family learning sessions. Could you give us some idea of what's covered?
In the family learning sessions?
Yes.
Yes, so I know the ladies in the Welcome Center, they will do a short survey with families and find out from them what it is they would like to hear more about. So they've done a piece on the DME, they've done pieces on McKinney-Vento and rights and parent rights. So things like that are what they offer through their family learning sessions, not to supplement or supplant any other sessions that are happening across the district, but it's kind of intimate. They have families that they know of they can reach out to through the Welcome Center, and they sign up and they'll come in for that particular learning session.
Question, and I know when guess so. Scratch that. I'm sorry. Previously, in previous years, when something similar to this, I know when Martha Bentham used to give this presentation. She used to kind of put it in categories. So we see July it was 763, but for the year we would know what that was, like transportation, whatever it was. We would know like what that number represents to give us a good idea of. In August it was 1,422, but was that mostly registrations?
Right.
Was it, so we were able to see the trends of what
Yes.
was happening and when. Like, I would be interested to know, in January it spiked up a little bit. Did we get like transfers in from other districts after the holidays? Did parents, because sometimes it helps us understand, like maybe parents maybe always wanted to take their kids out of a school, but maybe they had time to think about it when it's vacation and hearing from their kids. So it helped us understand the trends of what our families were going through behind the numbers.
And thank you. Yes, we do have that information. We can tease it out to just be the number of transportation requests or transfers. We do have that information. We didn't share it like that tonight, but we do have that.
One thing, I don't know if it's possible, but she used to make it like there's a concern. It was like concerns and complaints. Like some things are just concerns, so it's not like it was vacant. So she spoiled us probably a little bit, but it was, everything was there so we could kind of get a feel for what families are going through.
Absolutely, and that has not changed. We still mine that information, and we have that information readily available. So duly noted. At next presentation, we will share it differently.
Okay.
So we just shared it just as broadly intakes tonight, but we can definitely do that.
Okay,
We've also mined the data by school as well, along the categories that you're all the categories that show up, actually.
All right, and just wanted to go back here. I wanted to make sure that I did mention this piece because I think it's also important, that we've assisted 212 Hartford Public School students who were homeless, and 52 of those, and 52 out-of-district students. So I think that's important. People often wonder and ask about our homeless students, their families, and what is taking place. And with the Welcome Center, if you are a Hartford resident, if you have students that might be in another district, we are still going to assist you. So just really wanted to highlight that one data point. All right, so these next couple of slides, just want to speak to some things that have been happening in the district with families. So we have something called Partnerships with Purpose, and we convene our partners and have topical conversations, again, doing the same, asking them what it is they would like to have more information on. Most recently, Samuel Radford from Say Yes to Education was with us for our Partnerships with Purpose on February 22nd. So this is just a picture of that event, and he provided us with real life examples that were inspiring as well as engaging activities that prompted us to think about our own ability to communicate with families, and really did a great presentation around communicating with families. And these monthly meetings are held, these meetings are held monthly in various places. Our next meeting will be March 26, 2019, but that's Partnerships with Purpose for all of our partners. Again, in trying to build relationship and rapport with our families moving forward, we hosted a Hopes, Dreams, and Visions family fun night where families had an opportunity to come together and create their own vision boards to kind of map their dreams and where they want to land. That was facilitated by Mr. Abdul Muhammad from My People Clinical Services and Dream Chasers. He did an amazing job with our families to see our families truly engaged, and their children also had an opportunity to do a similar exercise while they were in childcare. But really hearing from our families what their hopes and dreams are really helps us think about how we work with our families as we continue to build that rapport and relationships. Another piece I just wanted to highlight, we've been hearing from our families that in addition to learning sessions that they attend around various topics that have to do with academics, they also want to have some downtime. So on February 2nd, we had a day out at the movies where families were able to sign up. They were there with their children. We packed out 2 theaters, over 550 families were in attendance, and they had an opportunity to watch The Kid Who Would Be King. And it was just a great event. Again, just downtime. It was great to see families, different schools, children from across the district just interacting with each other. And our families, they've shared with us, we don't mind coming to the learning session. We want to hear about the district model of excellence, but we also want to have just downtime with each other to interact and just build those relationships with other families. So upcoming events for our office. In March, the student internship program begins. March 8th, we will do an attendance campaign kickoff, and this is in support of our attendance initiative around chronic absenteeism. We'll be working with 6 schools to do a campaign kickoff for attendance. There's a prize at the end. I won't give that away. I'll have to tell the board privately what that is, but it's a good prize for our students and families. As I stated earlier, March 6th is the next FRA SFSP Professional Learning. March 14th, I'll say this nice and loud for the listening public, March 14th, we'll be having an SGC training and also a community budget forum. So please come out, that'll be held at Journalism and Media Academy. March 26th, Partnerships with Purpose. April 2019, we are looking to do a resource fair for our families. And then at the end of April, actually more like mid-April, we'll begin planning for our back to school campaign, because we know summer will be coming very quickly, and we want to make sure that we're ready for back to school. All right.
Nisha, there's the, I know this is not for families, but it is for our partners, the community all-call.
Okay.
If you want to kind of reference that a little bit.
Sure thing. So on March 27th, we will be doing a community all-call for partners to come together to really just talk about how we support the initiatives, the work happening in our district, especially around chronic absenteeism. So want to put that out to everyone. It's March 27th. We'll be able to give more details in the next week or so, but but that's important to share that it is taking place on March 27th is that community all call.
And
that
this
call to action.
specifically focusing and narrowing in on our summer
Yes.
programming. We know that we have committed to supporting our rising ninth graders. And so as a district, we've identified the limit, if you will, of our resources. And we know that there are many in our community from a partnership perspective that are willing and ready. And so we want to make sure that we're aligned. And so we're going to kind of call everyone in and have a huddle and plan collaboratively to support our students for the summer.
I'd like to give sort of a shout out. I went to the event in February, and I thought it was just wonderful, but I'd like to encourage my colleagues to attend these events that Ms. Blackberg has planned. You can speak to her or to Christina to get the details, but it's a great opportunity for us to engage as a parent, where we're not separated by a big table and microphones and so forth, but we're just sitting with them and talking and finding out what's on their minds and their hearts.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions or? Okay. Yes.
Hi, Sue. My question is going back to the MOU. You spoke quickly about the implementation schedule. Not sure if it was about the MOU, like in terms of implementing something fully in the next year or something to that effect. So kind of going back to the MOU, is that something that you're looking to put forth in terms of full implementation at a certain date? Like basically, what is the timeline for that?
Okay, so no, the MOU process is fully implemented.
Okay, great.
It's
okay.
fully implemented. It's the process we use.
Okay.
So if you're an ABC organization and you contact the office and say that I want to be a partner, that protocol that we have there, the flow chart, that is the process that we follow currently.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a, I don't think it's a question. I think it's more of a comment. I'm still, and I've said it before, I have a desire for our families. I have a desire for the district to be able to, all the things that are being done is good. We do need to engage and build relationships with families. But I have a desire for the district to be able to have that more academic. And I'm speaking as a parent. I'm speaking as, like, just recently, a friend of the family has 2 children, elementary, well, 1 middle school, 1 elementary, and needed support around math. I thought I could do it. But then I had to get my senior in high school, like, you have to help me, because it is, parents have to be able to assist in this. Math is something, right? So, and even my high school student, who is a high achiever in math, like, she takes math right now at the University of Hartford because she maxed out math in her school. Even she was saying some of that middle school math was, like, heavy for her. So I was like, if she's feeling that way and she's still in the system, I'm still hoping the district can get to a place, back to a place, because before we didn't really do a lot of supporting, but we at least gave them the tools and pointed them where they could get that support at, or at least let them know what, like, to expect. And I'm hoping that we could get back with that academic piece, because we want to help our children, our friends' children, our family, but we need the tools to do that, and that will help build the village that we have amongst families and friends, but we have to have the tools to be that village. So I'm hoping that the academic piece could be reintroduced and district-wide, and that the district is leading in, and we're not so much so leaning. We could lean on partners, I get that, but we have to own some of what we offer and how we support families ourselves. So that's just my hope.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to piggyback on that. Thank you, Ms. Brody. That was a great comment. I know that the team is also working a lot on family literacy. And I consistently go back to, just because we can read, we're not always being as helpful with our kids as we think we are. For years, I thought reading comprehension was a different thing than it actually is. So I love the idea of the tools. We're talking about the guided reading, the close reading. It would be great to have a set of tools as, like, parents and caregivers outside of the school to be able to really emphasize this stuff at home, because many of us either don't understand what exactly that is, or we make our own assumptions about what it is. And I love that concept of how we're building a village and us all being on the same page, or at least having resources and toolkits, because we know it definitely, that happens in literacy in terms of we think we know how to do it. And then to your point with the math, that's a whole other conversation. My Calc 1 and 2 was like in 1991 and 2. So yeah, but if we could do more of that, I think that would be really, really helpful, because I think there's a lot of parents out there and others who are trying to help our kids, and we're actually not as helpful as we think we're trying to be, right? So I would love to see more of that. And I know you guys are working on something, so I look forward to seeing what comes out of it.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so we will go to the community school redesign, purposeful partnerships. All right. Okay, so always want to start here. And as we know that what we are trying to do is ensure that the whole student is addressed. So as we think about the community school framework and this redesign, coming from a place that we are supporting the whole student, ensuring that our beautiful and capable students are receiving the supports that they need. And it's already been shared that this is a district priority. It's one of the major goals of the office, is to implement a holistic community school model. And so what we are really looking to build is a community school ecosystem in our district that supports the whole student. So again, this just shows the action supporting the family and community partnerships work. Again, schools, the implementation measure where schools are to be tiered across the district based on identified needs, and each school has at least 2 viable partners. So what are community schools? So community schools are schools that partner with families and community organizations. They reflect local needs, assets, priorities, and rethink and rebuild relationships based on trust. And since each community school is a reflection of local needs and assets and their priorities, it's clear to say that no 2 schools are going to look the same because of the need of that school. So I think that's what really makes this model strong, is that it's right fitted to the particular school based on their needs and the priorities. And by having a community school, you have an opportunity to create and implement that shared vision for that particular school that leads to student and school success. So in the frame, there are 4 core partnership components that anchor this framework: family and community engagement, collaborative practice, integrated student supports, and expanded learning opportunities. So family and community engagement, it's essential in fostering relationships of trust and respect and building the capacity of all stakeholders and the school to empower decision-making and leverage local resources. Collaborative practices provide that relational glue that connects and reinforces the other tiers and makes it foundational to the success of the community school. Integrated student supports provide and coordinate a range of individualized on-site services and supports for students. And lastly, expanded learning opportunities are essential to the school's capacity to support students' academic growth, as well as to help them develop socially, emotionally, and physically, and really help them have well-structured out-of-school time, enrichment experiences, and opportunities. So on this slide, we talk about community schools and the tiered partnership components. So what you see here are 4 tiers, and each tier looks different. Each tier looks different. So the schools were tiered using data from the State Department of Education Accountability Index. The State Department of Education uses a broad set of 12 indicators that help tell the story of how well a school is preparing its students for success in college, their careers, and in life. And of course, the index is more than test scores, but the index does provide a more holistic, multi-factor perspective of district and school performance. So the schools were tiered on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being the minimal level of supports, and 4 being the highest level of supports. So here you will see that each tier has a component, and I also distributed a sheet that speaks to, if I can borrow your sheet, and this sheet speaks to all of the tiered components under each tier. So all of our schools will be community schools. All of our schools will be community schools. However, each of our schools will fall into one of these particular tiers. And I'll say one more time that schools were tiered on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being the minimal level of supports, but the school will receive supports, and 4 being the highest level of supports that a school would possibly need.
Question. I'm realizing now, and help me, is tier 1 and 2 looking exactly alike?
So,
Yeah.
so in full disclosure and transparency, tier 1 does not have that last one, intentional community partnerships. Probably in one of our saves, it was just moved over incorrectly. So just a transparent moment.
Yeah, okay.
Technology does that sometimes.
Thank you.
Okay.
So yeah, then you'll be able to see the cascade.
Absolutely, and it is a cascade, but thank you. And we'll send that update to Christina. Okay. Okay, so these are the school designations by tier. So looking at the previous slide, tiers 1 through 4, it is cascading. Tier 1, minimal level of supports. Tier 4, the maximum level per se of supports. And this is where our schools fall into each of the tiers. So as you're looking at the school designations, you can see that tier 2, the majority of our schools fall into tier 2. And then our current cohort of community schools, right now there are 7 schools that fall in that cohort, fall between tiers 3 and tier 4. And we have 2 schools that are current community schools that have been re-tiered and now fall into tier 2. And those 2 schools are HMTCA Hartford Magnet Trinity College Academy and West Middle School. So again, all of our schools will be community schools. All of our schools will be community schools. Tier 3 and Tier 4 have more supports, and in the community school world is what we would call more of a full service community school because they have the maximum level of supports. But again, I want to emphasize all schools will be community schools. And so schools were tiered using the data from that State Department of Education Accountability Index. And of course, not just looking at test scores, but using those 12 indicators to really speak to the story of that school. That's how the schools were tiered, was using that information from the State Department of Education Accountability Index.
Just want to add that the 17-18 accountability reports were recently released. And so as I look at Tier 4, we know that MD Fox has exited turnaround status. Can we just clap for that for a minute? So they will be shifting a tier. And so we're still analyzing the data, and so it might need to be calibrated. But
Thank you. Okay. So this slide is our phased implementation plan for our community schools. So if you look towards the left, this is our current cohort of community schools. And for the 2019-2020 school year, the schools that are listed here are the proposed schools to be added as community schools. Do want to call attention that schools that are going through a configuration would receive special transition support and a particular plan around that school because they are a school that's being reconfigured. So just calling attention to Milner and like Weaver, those schools are being reconfigured. So that would require special supports, a special plan for those schools. So for the 2019-2020 school year, we would be adding Weaver, Sand, Hartford Public High School, and MD Fox. And based on the information that MD Fox has now moved out of turnaround status, that could change. But those are the proposed schools for the 2019-2020 school year.
I just wanted to add, in Ms. Jett's comment about the conversations around the reconfiguration of schools, we are having intentional conversation with the current CBOs to make sure that the services follow the students. So as some of the reconfigurations are grade reconfigurations, either they will become fully elementary schools or fully middle schools, to make sure that the conversations are happening now so that the services follow the students where they're going to meet the grade appropriate services required.
Thank you.
something else that I wanted to highlight, as we have had some conversations in when we've shared the framework, either at a committee meeting or with the Partnership for Student Success or with the principals or with the cabinet, thinking about, for example, if we look at the 1920 schools that are going to be coming online, yes, the shifts and the reconfigurations, but also the fact, for example, Weaver, right? It's a new school that's coming online. There's a lot that's going to be happening for Weaver. And so some of the wonderings that have come, that have been brought up relate to readiness. And so those are things that we also have to think about. And so want to just put it out there for you all in case you have some of those thoughts or just thoughts, given that those are some of the themes that continue to come up for us. Is the school that is going to be opening a new building, does it have the readiness to take on becoming a community school as well? And we've heard both. We've heard, ooh, that might be too much, but we've also heard, well, this is the time they're opening, do it and try to build it out and then work through all of the pain points as you move on. So I just want to be transparent as to what some of the themes are.
Thank you.
Question. We're now talking about community schools throughout, all of them being community schools. Our community schools currently are elementary schools, HMTCA is middle school. Do we have models of community schools and high schools?
Yes, so we're going to be sharing a model for a high school in a little bit, but
Okay.
yes. And just to share with you, in partnership with HBSS and looking at other national leaders, the Institute for Educational Leadership, we have looked at models and have places that we can go to kind of see what has worked and what hasn't worked. But later in the presentation, yes, we're excited to share that. All right.
So before I have a question, sorry. So as we look at this, and just as a reminder, these are the full service tier 3 and 4 schools,
That's right.
Dr. B, you mentioned services to follow the student. There was some previous conversation, but I just want to, my wondering here is, are we talking about our tier 3 students, right? Because one of the things that we obviously are aware of are resources, and we talked about need. So as we think about services to follow the student, is it that identification of those young people who really have most need in making sure that they're supported as they continue on?
That's a great question. Yes. If we were going to kind of tier it in that type of priority, it's the 4 and the 3s that we're trying to make sure that their services continued. And we're sensitive to the fact that some principals who are schools that are receiving these students, some of the feedback that we receive from our administrator is, please make sure those services continue because I currently don't have them.
That's right.
So we are very sensitive to that and making sure that those services continue. And that's why we need to we're having those conversations now to make sure and identify those students, right, who are going to this school, who are going to that school, to make sure that those services continue.
So that also, Ms. Oliver, applies to, if you go back to the slide that has all the schools listed by tiers, and we know that there's a calibration for Hartford, Magnet Trinity, College Academy, and West Middle. We know that they're going to fall right back a tier, which means that the level of services is going to change, is going to decrease, and so we have to make sure that we are intentional around maximizing the supports for tier 3 students, not to be confused with tiers 1 to 4, but when we talk about tiering in terms of levels of support for students, tier 1 being, right, most of the students are served, tier 2, less students, and then tier 3, the students that need the intense amount of supports. That's something that we wanna think about for those 2 schools that are dropping a tier. Right now, it's pretty much open, right, to students that can have access to the program after school because either they have transportation or for whatever the reason, right? We have to make sure that we work on targeting the students based on need, given that the services are going to be now limited.
Thank you. I just have a quick question with the services following the student, just to piggyback off of Ms. Oliver. With schools that are changing directions, meaning from going from currently being like a middle school model and then or higher grade and now decreasing, how are we going to look at providing those services for those individuals or those youth?
So I'll use Milner because that's been very public. We know they're moving. So Milner students who would be going, some would probably be going to Sand, some would be going to Wish. And then we know their middle school comes on. So working with them to ensure that the services that are going to be offered, especially at JMA, are going to really be pointed towards a middle school model. So having conversations with the middle school design teams now, having conversations with the CBO, trying to make sure that the services that are there are right for middle school students. And then thinking about what is going to be at Sand, what is going to be at Wish for those students coming from Milner. So Wish is like a partnership school already, so they're kind of in the way and ready to receive students that have been in a community school frame probably since they were in kindergarten. So really just having intentional conversations, working with the schools to get ready for that type of pivot with the families. Because families have been very vocal, like my child is going to a new place. Are they going to still have the services on the ground that we've become accustomed to? So on our end, just really having those conversations up front to ensure that students are going to receive those services. And if they're not there, then having a different conversation to try to ensure that whether it's dental or mental health or something else, that we try to move those services to that building to accommodate those students coming in.
Okay, thank you. And when we refer to the term services, are we looking at the CBOs as a whole, or are we looking, I'm not sure, and again, let me rephrase that. So I'm not sure if parents are asking for specific services or they're asking for specific CBO partnerships?
Both.
Okay.
So it's a conversation. Of course, any parent, if I'm accustomed to a particular CBO, that's what I know, that's what I'm accustomed to, but it does not mean that another entity cannot provide the services. So really kind of making sure that parallel tracks are happening. Dr. V mentioned that having conversations with CBOs up front to know a pivot is coming, but also having those same conversations with parents. So as we look to roll out the framework, you have to have those open conversations with parents to say it may look or feel different, but what we want to assure you is that services will be able to be accessed at these schools.
Okay, thank you.
And if we have children at low-tiered school that need a higher level of services, we'll be able to refer them out. They would not be without the services.
Correct. And in an instance, that may happen, you know, if, and I think not just in the movement of students, we know that we are a district that can be very transient. So if I move out of, I'm going to do it by zones, if I move out of a particular zone and in that zone, at this school is services offered, but I'm going to another school, it would be the same process that you're going to make that referral so services can be provided for the student.
So is it fair to say then, we're saying a tiered approach, but it's really at two different levels, right? So one is the school level, but one is at the individual student level, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And so, oh, sorry, go for it.
And again, so that's something that we speak about as a part of that integrated student supports, really getting to that individualized piece for a student, and just trying to be clear, okay, what does that student need?
And it is an area of continuous improvement. You know, when you think about the regular work of a school and you know, the continuum of services, we know that early intervention and student assistance teams are part of the daily work of a school. And so it's making sure that those structures exist, that they're functioning in the right way so that we can identify the student need and then be able to plug the student and the family.
Yes. And just to, you know, add on to what Dr. Torres-Rodriguez said, and that then would become the role of that individual in that school, whether it's the community school coordinator who is working with other entities in the building, the school social worker, to ensure that students are pointed in the right direction for services. You're welcome. Okay. All right, so on this slide, I think I stopped at 2020, 21. So you'll see here the schools that are slated to come on that year: Rawson, MLK, McDonough, and Buckley. And then the last year, school year 2021, 22, would be Parkville and Batchelder. And this phased implementation plan, again, just want to be clear that this is looking at schools that are tier 3 and tier 4. So all schools are community schools. All schools will be receiving tiered supports based on your tier, but this implementation plan is in regards to tiers 3 and tier 4. All right, so these next.
I just have a really quick question, and this is kind of picking back off of what Ms. Brody brought up. So when we're talking about CBOs and those partnerships and those intentional partnerships to provide the wraparound services, I'm not sure at the district level if we even have the capacity to do it, but it is really helping with the academia aspects of, like, we know our proficiency rates are low, we know our literacy rates are low. I'm not sure when we're doing this tiered approach if we're looking at that aspect too, and making sure that we're providing those wraparound services for those schools that are extremely low. I mean, all of our schools are extremely low. We shouldn't be proud of where we are. I know we're looking to get better, but just really hoping that when we're doing this wraparound services that we're being intentional about putting the supports in there for those academic services as well.
Absolutely. So the fundamental premise of community schools is whole student. So it's not just out of school time or enrichment, but it's really looking at the entire student. And the greatest success of a community school is for students to achieve academically. Like, that's what you want, because by providing wraparound services and providing other supports, the aim is to remove those barriers so students can attend to learning. So as we're looking at a needs assessment, one of the first components under the tier is the assets and needs assessment. That asset and needs assessment is going to look at everything the school needs, but not doing that independently. Also working with the principal, the building leader, to look at what the school improvement plan is going to say. What are the goals and priorities of a district? So all of that would be a part of the assets, the needs assessment, and whatever priorities of the school. And that's how you would look at CBOs, partnerships, wraparound services. But really, that's the goal of community school, is to remove those barriers so students can really get to learning. So these next few slides look at our schools across zones. So the current community schools are right here. As you can see, we have 1 community school in zone 1, 2 in zone 2, 1 in zone 3, and 3 in zone 4. So that's where we currently are. Moving to the next school year, we would be adding a school in each zone. So moving us to 11 community schools in tier 3 and tier 4 with that full service approach. The following year, we would add additional schools that would bring us to 15 tier 3 and tier 4 schools. And then the following year, we would have 17 tier 3 and tier 4 schools across all 4 of our zones. Again, all schools, community schools, a tiered approach for all of our schools, but these zone maps are looking at tier 3 and tier 4 schools. All right, and this is just another graphic that shows that we're moving from 7 to 17 in tier 3 and tier 4.
So one thing, Nushet, that I'm thinking about is to perhaps have an overlay of the map of all schools by zone. I thought about it when Ms. Clark raised the question about the servicing students that may not be in a tier 3, tier 4 school, and I think Ms. Oliver also raised the question. And so if we identify providers also by zone, to identify them as providers to the tier 1 and tier 2 schools whose students might need those, intense supports.
Correct. I think it would definitely be helpful. I think one of the other things is just really ensuring that when it comes to like the teaching aspect, that we are being really intentional from the district side, because the way teaching is done now is totally different than the way it was done when I even was in school. And I haven't been gone that long, but just in general, I think that when we're looking at how things are done and the way things need to be structured, many organizations that are partnering with us from the district side, holding them to be there to kind of provide that wraparound service is absolutely correct, where we're taking out the barriers of there. However, it's very important that from the district level, and I know that it might just be a capacity issue, or maybe we don't necessarily have the supports in place just yet, but just making sure that we have people on the ground while we're doing those interventions, or having partners do those interventions, that it's intentional as well. So taking those barriers out, allowing them to come into class and be ready for that work. We have the support from the district to ensure that whatever is going on, if it's literacy or proficiency or whatever, that there is something or someone intentionally there who knows how to do it.
Yes, and it also applies, for example, to like our higher ed partnerships, right? And that some of our higher ed partnerships are going to be, are going to go deeper, if you will. But that doesn't mean that the schools that are not tier 3 or 4 shouldn't have access to those. So we have to just kind of tease that out a little more.
Okay. All right. So this is just another graphic of Tier 3 and Tier 4 schools across all of our zones. So the next couple of slides looks at the community partnerships by zone. Thought it important to share these slides. And again, this is not a comprehensive list of all of our partnerships, but as you can see across our zones, and I'll click through, that there's an array of partnerships already existing in each of our zones, from corporate partners, faith-based, professional organizations, youth development. So we want to kind of ramp up, beef up the partnerships, but also leveraging the partnerships in each zone to support the schools. All right, so this slide is really just a community schools redesign contrast, taking us from what we currently have to what we are looking to. So a current cohort of 7 schools, moving to 17 Tier 3 and Tier 4 schools, but all 42 Hartford Public High Schools receiving tiered supports. The current model is implemented and operationalized by the Hartford Partnership for Student Success, but looking to implement and operationalize the model through Hartford Public Schools in partnership with the Hartford Partnership for Student Success. Currently, we operate Monday through Friday. Our goal is to increase access to our schools from Sunday to Saturday and on the weekends, extended hours. Right now, we have partnerships that are aligned and looking at their resources, and Ms. Clark, I think this is really what you are getting to, is ensuring that we have intentional learning-focused partnerships across the tiers. Right now, we have student supports and services, but looking to make sure that they're integrated and individualized student supports. Currently, we utilize a lead agency model, but looking to partnership efforts between the lead agency. I would add in there a coordinating agency, community schools coordinator, and school and support staff. So schools that are Tier 3 and Tier 4, we would utilize that lead agency. Tiers 1 and 2 schools, they may have an agency already in their building that kind of pulls out and does that level of coordination for them in their buildings. So it would be lead agency / a coordinating agency. Identified resources per school agency, and there's some common resources across schools within the network, the current network, but looking to leverage the zone model to streamline and scale up resources for all schools within a particular zone. Lastly, there's no community school model at the high school level, but our student success centers would be used as the pillar for the high school model at all 3 neighborhood high schools. Okay, so this is the frame for our Student Success Center high school model. And as you can see, the 3 components would be academic support, social emotional support, college and career support. This would also include a component for credit recovery and would be led by a Student Success Center specialist. So that Student Success Center specialist would be doing the work that's mentioned here, the academic support, the social emotional support, that college and career support, and bringing in a community school coordinator to also work with that Student Success Center specialist to identify additional resources and other opportunities that can be brought in for the students at the high school, at the Student Success Center at our high schools.
Just wanted to add that, there's a similarity and also a distinction with regard to the current model, the lead agency model, right? There is a coordinator in the current model. And so what we are saying is that there would be a coordinator as well, but, it would be a Hartford Public Schools employee. But the function would be the same, right? To serve as the coordinator of all of the supports. And of course, through the lens of what a high schooler needs, which is why we've identified those 3 pillars for the high school model.
All right, so that is the overview of the proposed community school framework for Hartford Public Schools. So I don't know if there are additional questions, and then I'll try to answer those and go from there.
I don't know if my question is for you or for Dr. Vázquez-Mato, because in our teaching and learning committee meeting yesterday, we were presented with a plan, I guess, for our middle schools, our standalone middle schools that are coming online. And it had me a little bit worried that we don't have a solid something. We're still working on it. That troubled me, and I guess and I'm seeing that throughout this presentation. For instance, Milner, that we've talked a lot about tonight, probably because they're transitioning to be a full middle school. Is it safe to say, because I didn't have the understanding of, and I was on the phone, so it might be my fault, and I wasn't present at the meeting physically, was the, those who are developing this plan, is it per school? Like, do we have like a design team per school, or do we have a collective of people that are
So I'm going to have Ms. Avila talk about the school design process. I can talk about the Student Success Center, because they're, even though they eventually connect, they're kind of 2 different,
Yeah, okay.
well, projects, if you may. So I'll let her talk first about the school design work, and then I can piggyback on the Student Success Center.
Can I just ask a clarifying question, Ms. Brody? Is it, are you wondering about like a middle school strategy as part of the design?
No, because, and I'll probably always say in the past, and forgive me, but when schools were being introduced and something new, Hartford Public Schools developed design teams. It was community components, and everybody come together to develop every aspect of what this school looks like, from academics to community partners and teaching and learning and all of that. And I don't feel that for what we're going into with our middle school. Like, I feel like because the DME, the middle school, pulling out and having standalone middle schools, that was a big part, is a big part of the DME, and a very crucial part. So I feel like when we design schools in the past and we put the community in with that developing of it, I don't know if this is being done, because maybe it is. That's what I guess that's my question. Like, how is this being developed? Because that helps us even make it more marketable to the community, because it's many community partners and people that are aware of this process. They were a part of it, so different people are able to say, oh, I know, yep, that's happening, and it could be a buzz. But right now it's like everyone's sitting waiting, like, what's happening with these middle schools and what will it be? So that whole development of what it will be, I don't know what that is.
So right now, the committees consist of, we're doing an internal process to sort of get a stronger foundation, and then the next level will be to reach out to, additionally to parents and to community members, right? So that they can additionally have, input in it. The idea was to make sure that we are on the same footing and have a common understanding as a district, and then moving forward to go outside to the community. So if you're wondering when we're going to land on it, we should land, I would say, solidly by the end of the, yesterday I said the end of March, but for us, and then we'll go out to the community piece, so that the beginning will be done by probably the end of April, early May, so that you will have a hard copy and an understanding of what that model is, and so will everyone else.
Okay, so will the when I say community, that can consist of parents and...
Absolutely, it would consist of parents, partners that have worked at middle schools, and other partners as well. So it wouldn't just be parents, but also be community members as well.
So that, through that process, we're going to have a plan for, is it going to be per school, like, or is it going to be collective?
So the idea is to have a middle school model for our district. There will be some differences in particular schools, but basically the philosophical beliefs about middle school and the characteristics of the middle school will carry out throughout all of the middle schools, but there will be some individual differences.
So it won't be the what I'm thinking of, what a design team, or what a design team was in the past. It won't be that. It'll be more a collection of people coming together to put together this plan, not specific to the community that the school will reside in.
So, for example, one of the elements of a middle school is student voice, and how student voice is very important in the center of the work when focusing on the whole student. How that looks at one middle school is very different than at another middle school, but the important piece that we all have in common is that student voice is very relevant and present in that school. So, that's where there might be a difference, but the idea is that they all have student voice, and a strong presence of student voice would be consistent through all the middle schools.
Okay, and I'm only asking it because we're going to have middle schools, and we all know that middle schools, I think, probably needs the more support than any other grade period, right? So with knowing that, we are having middle schools in particular neighborhoods, because the circles that I'm in outside of school stuff, they don't know. So they can't be invested in that because is no way for them to be invested in it, because traditionally they're used to when something is coming online, they can have input and have some involvement in it. So I'm wondering, how are we gonna be able to get that community buy-in to support these students who need a lot, right? How are we gonna do that when it's not like Milner, your input on that particular school, because you're actually giving input, or if you're contributing, you're just contributing to what the district wants for a middle school model, not particular to a particular community. So the community members that are not with any CBO or connected in that way, but they're living in that area and they're saying they want to be invested in the school, how would we get that investment from them without inviting them to be invested?
Well, they have to be invited to be invested. You're absolutely right that would have to happen. And I think, starting with the principal and working with Ms. Blackburn to really make sure that we have the right community partners, and any suggestions that you have of who those community partners are, to really sit at the table to have their input and to be part of the creation is important.
Okay, and I think the last thing I'll say is that when we get to talking about individual schools and individual schools' needs, and we know they will be similar and they will be different at the same time. So for when it gets to a point that we're developing a plan around a certain school, that needs to be a separate conversation with certain individuals. And maybe at that point, that can give them the invitation to be a part of that building, and to be more specific for the students in that building to be successful for their specific needs. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So, this is one of the reasons I actually think it's really important for Weaver to be a community school. So I am biased, as many of you know, that I am a Weaver Beaver and proud alum and still bleed green. There was a lot of community voices already happened, and I think that it's an opportunity for us to leverage that and really take advantage of the voice and the work that's already happened. I think what it is acknowledging is that it was a process that happened in the community, somewhat organic, that has kind of built its way up, not usually what would happen with a community school, right? However, there's a lot of data, a lot of people invested, and I think one of the things that I know that, and I'm hopeful for, and I've had a conversation with the superintendent about this, is there's work that's happening at the district level about this work that I think is really important for community to hear and know. That message is not getting out loud enough for them to know that, guess what, not only do you have a voice, it's a voice that people actually are listening to and acknowledging and are actually reflecting upon and bringing that and integrating into their plans. But as we think about the importance of community school and underscoring, as Ms. Blackburn said, local needs, we have a lot of information. We have a lot of good data. So I'm really hopeful that we can, I'm hopeful it's going to work out, guess what I'm saying. I'm really respectful of the fact of the issue of readiness, because it is a new building. There are schools coming together. It's the code. It's a lot going on. But there's definitely a community buy-in for that school. And I know we're acknowledging as a special project, and I'm okay with that because I think it is. But I'm very hopeful that we're going to be able to take advantage of all that momentum and energy that's built up and commitment, and really move forward with the Weaver High School being able to be a community school from day one.
Can you, Yvette, speak to the crosswalk? I know that, that felt like, it was like looking for needles in a haystack, but it was very important for us to really be able to, overlay and then really dig deep. So one, speak to that, and then the work of getting others to be part of pretty much the opening. I mean, I can't believe I'm even saying that, right? The opening, which is like on the, like before you know it, it'll be here.
So there was a weaving steering committee that included community members and that really put together a set of recommendations, and they worked through that. And so we are at the point where we've done a crosswork with an internal committee that really supports the alignment and identifying the alignment of those recommendations. We are scheduling a committee. We are trying, Shannon and I've been working really hard to create a time and space so that we can speak to some community members to organize a meeting to share those crosswalks, right? And at that point, Dr. Sellers, Dr. Negron, and Ms. Blackberg will be there to talk about that crosswork, and I will be there as well to talk about exactly what the findings of our crosswork and next steps, so that the community will hear the crosswork and as far as the next steps in that process. Thank you. That's very good. And the second piece.
Well, I just want to also add to that, without getting into all of the details, as I heard and as I read, you know, the documents and the crosswalk, there were many similarities, is what the finding, if you will, was. The terminology differed significantly, but nonetheless, it was, you know, the moves, if you will, were very, very similar. So I just wanted to highlight that was one of the major takeaways. Go ahead.
And the second piece, getting other people involved, do you mean, just want to clarify your...
Well, you know, I know that the steering committee was leading, you know, and co-leading a lot of this work, but you know, there are other partners as well that want to be part of the work. And so at some point, I think that's what, you know, Ms. Brody was speaking to, right? At what point do we create the opportunity for the broader conversation?
So the first opportunity will probably be at that meeting when we're discussing that crosswork, that we will invite other additional people who want to be involved in that process, to add to the community members and to expand at this point in their engagement around Weaver. You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I'm waiting for the question. Go for it.
Hey, this is really a very ambitious undertaking.
Yes.
I'm concerned about funding.
Yeah. There's the question.
So I'll start it, and then the team can jump on. So just today, actually, we had a meeting with the Partnership for Student Success to talk about current funding, and you know, there was agreement to continue to fund the current schools, inclusive of the 2 that are going to be re-tiered, and so that there was commitment there. You know, we have to strategically and aggressively seek funding. When we look at the 4 schools for year 1, we have identified funding, and I'll have, you know, Dr. Vasquez-Matos speak to the specific, you know, the Title IV and all of those specific funding sources. But we're also having, as you know, ERS. This is part of their work in terms of their long-term financial sustainability plan, because ultimately we don't want to be in a this overly reliance stance to support this work, given that we're saying that this is going to be foundational to who we are as a district and how we support our students and their families. So we're going to have to do you know, our due diligence around identifying additional funding for that. But in the meantime, we know that the 4 schools for year 1 are in good shape. Dr. Vasquez-Matos.
So just to kind of echo Dr. Torres-Rodriguez's statements about really strategically starting to look of how we can sustain this for the years to come, right? Because we're talking about several schools who are going to come online, and there are budget obligations in order to make sure that the program works in its fidelity based on what you've seen. So with that said, we have secured some funds to be able to, especially in the high school component, which is a substantial amount of dollars, for Hartford High to kind of create the Student Success Center, which we use and identified the Title IV entitlement grant to be able to do that. But moving forward is how do we actually then start to really leverage all of the other entitlement grants, all of the other state or federal grants, such as the SIG grant, the Commissioners Network, to be able to actually see if actually some of this work can live within those grant dollars in order to actually be able to sustain the program. Additionally, Dr. Torres Rodriguez and I had a lively conversation today around, well, how do we pursue the additional dollars through private funders or those who really believe in this vision and willing to partner with us to fund this initiative. So we have actually outlined how much would it cost us pretty much in the next couple of years, and it's a significant amount in the sense of how would actually we'd be able to kind of sustain this. The good thing is that we're good until next year to give us enough time to plan really with ERS of how actually this can also live within our budgets. Because if this is something that the district, the board, and the administration really sees as a true investment with a high return of investment to the community, then it should be living within our budget as part of our general operation dollars. So how do we actually start bringing this as part of our budget conversations? And making sure that moving forward, this actually lives within the school's budgets. Because eventually, as we know, grants can sunset. So we still have to take the responsibilities. But if we can actually be able to leverage some of these grants to give us that time of planning so that we can actually create a sustainable plan so that it can live within our general operations budget for sustainability for years to come. So that's where we're at. I think we are optimistic that we can actually pretty much achieve this, but there has to be some really strategic alignment and ownership when it comes to budget decisions of how this is going to live moving forward.
One thing that I would like to add, and this is, an extension of the conversation that happened at the Hartford Partnership for Student Success today, and that is around the vision that I have and that I believe the partnership is ready to support with regard to expanding the table, if you will, the partnership table, to identify not just additional sources of funding, right, when we think about money, but additional perhaps people and resources from the sense of a capacity. And ask today from the partnership was, for us to cost out the entire expense beyond the community school model, because I firmly believe that the partnership has to align and support the broader work, not just community schools work. And we know that the community school work connects to our efforts to improve chronic absenteeism, our literacy. And so how do we expand the table to have broader supports? And the ask was for us to cost out beyond this community school tier 3 and tier 4, for example, summer programming, extended day programming for those schools that are not tier 3, tier 4, before school programming in some of our high need, neighborhoods. And so I wanted just to reference that we started doing this work as it relates to the goal of community schools, but we know that it just has so many arms, and so we have to just be smart about aligning the entire strategy, the larger strategy, the DME.
I just want to add to Dr. Torres Rodriguez's comments about that. So, and I totally agree that this has to live within the bigger picture of all of these initiatives that we're trying to do to address what the data is telling us based on student needs. So, and that's how the conversation actually started today was, you know, Dr. Vasquez Matos, we have more work to do in reference of how do we actually start making sure that all of these initiatives live within one holistic approach, and not just to dollars. So a good example is when we look at our to Ms. Brody's point about middle school. So we are being really intentional of creating this high school summer bridge program for incoming ninth graders to prepare them for high school during that transition. So we do know how much it will probably cost us personnel-wise, but there is a huge component that we have in our conversations that we're planning, and the team knows because we have homework to do until the next meeting, is all those other things that can happen that we need community support in, such as sports programs, such as a summer youth employment, mentorship, things that we really don't, to Ms. Clarkson, we don't have the capacity to do internally, but there is an opportunity for other partners to come in and says we can actually help with that, which allows us to actually really develop and really start to articulate what our academic program or that program will look like when we have those summers, which are in kind or services that really don't have no dollars to it, but have a high return on investment to kind of what we're trying to accomplish when it comes to kind of the theory behind the programs and so forth. And that's just one program on top of the community schools, because there are others that are in queue to kind of start developing and so forth.
So go ahead.
So I hear a lot of intentional work behind finding the funding for the tier 3 and 4 schools. So I guess my concern is when we're looking at the 1s and 2s and we're talking about all schools, community schools, is that the approach of the in-kind aspect, or I just want to make sure that I heard correctly?
Sorry? No.
So it's both.
Okay.
So we're not leaving out the 1s and 2s. I think what we know is that the ones that are going to come online, for example, the high school model, in order for the Student Success Center to live, it's personnel. So how do we get that done? And as you know, Ingenuity was part of the blended learning approach. So there's a cost for those programs as we expand the participation or the licenses for participation. But that we don't leave out the other schools that are in 1 and 2. We actually say, okay, how can we actually maximize some of the dollars that we have, whether it's Title I, which there's some dollars that are regulated for community school work, or others that they can actually help in supporting their work around community schools. So they're not left out. We just know that in order for us to kind of get to where we want to get to this framework, there's more funding involved when it comes to the 3 and 4 schools.
Okay, thank you. And do we have, and maybe that'll be a next meeting, do we have a rollout for when we're looking to have the other schools? Like, I know that this is a framework for the 3 and 4, and all of the zones were for 3 and 4. And I know Superintendent stated we'll have like that overlay of the 1s and 2s, but just a rollout process for when those 1s and 2s will actually be considered quote unquote community schools.
So as part of our next steps, so immediate next steps would be to look at that implementation plan, and we're actually developing that. So thinking about how do we work with those schools that are tiers 1 and 2, and to your previous question, even thinking about what do they already have on the ground, like currently what do they have in their buildings, partnerships, what kind of things do they have already that we can build on and help them to extend? But that's our next step, is to really look at the implementation plan, working with school administrators, professional learning, getting to the schools to help them get ready for the start of a new school year.
Thank you.
And you mentioned capacity earlier, and that certainly is a big concern, not only our own internal capacity, but our partners. The services that they are currently offering will have to be greatly expanded. Either the existing partners expand their capacity, or we get new partners that can provide those services. So what's the plan and the workings around that?
And thank you for asking that, because that's super important. So thinking about how we move currently as a network or a cohort of schools, there is a lot of professional learning that happened with partners through the years. And so as a part of that implementation and rollout, we would be doing the same and really encouraging partners to take advantage of what does it mean to work in a community school? How are you going to look at the resources you have and maybe partner up with another entity to deliver the best level of services in your school? So the community school frame as a whole, there is lots of information to be shared and to be taught and to be given to CBOs to get them ready to deliver that level of service. Because understanding, you're right, some CBOs may say, I just don't have the bandwidth to do this, and that's okay. We want you to be upfront and say, I'm unable to deliver this to X number of schools. But as a part of that implementation process, we would really have to work with CBOs to really get them ready for what's going to come as we look to leverage across schools and across the zones. So it's not like an all call to CBOs say just come, but it would also require training with CBOs. And we've done that in the past over the last 10 years in the current cohort, and would look to do the same.
But I would also add to that, Mr. Flores, that because we're clearly articulating our want or the expectation, we have something now to do a great ask, to expand the partnerships and to see who else is out there that can come on board to meet the needs of the district. And that's going to be important. I mean, Dr. Torres mentioned that in March she's going to do a call to help with our summer bridge program. That's a new initiative for us, but it will be clearly articulated to see who will actually say, I'm in, but we already have clearly articulated what's the kind of the expectations, the needs, and kind of identify the schools clearly.
And in addition to that, it's beyond who can provide the need. It's also how can we build capacity in our partners when we're talking about the literacy strategies that we're honing in, our close reading, our guided reading, the fact that we're working on restorative practices, the fact that we're working on chronic absenteeism. What are those key messages, key strategies that we can build capacity in our CBOs, who are going to spend 4, 5, potentially 6 weeks with our students in the summertime? And so it's not just, calling them in to give us what they have, but it's also saying, here is what we, want to build your capacity in and how we can share our resources as well.
So I'm assuming that we are working on building a lot of these partnerships. We don't have firm commitments of people to come in and do the work, but it's something that we're working on as we go forth.
Correct.
Yes, and also, Chairman Flores, if you think about the lead agency model, there is an RFP process that would have to take place as well. And so through that process, also identifying potential viable partners.
Absolutely.
To clarify, though, we just went through earlier process where we acknowledged an MOU. So we talked about the word commitment. There are, on the ground right now, organizations who are committed, whether it be the current cohort or other partners that I think we need to acknowledge. I would
to be fully transparent, being a person on the other side of the school building door sometimes, in the space of youth development, I think that there's a lot of untapped resources also in community that we also have to acknowledge. So where I would go is, I would say that we already have a place or a starting point that we need to do some work on, but I don't think we're at a step zero, per se.
I agree.
And I would agree with you. And that was really why I wanted to share those slides that had some of the community partnerships in each zone, because that's exactly it. There are a lot of partners and CBOs that are out there, so we can build on that and add to and have a reciprocal relationship where they're informing us and we're also informing them.
I think I had a thought earlier. I'm going to try to wrap it back around. And it was really just, say again? It was just a bright point, you know, as I kind of reflect on the day. So we started with the principals this morning, talking about accountability index and where we were in the areas of improvement, quite frankly, which were around achievement. But when we looked at our college and career readiness indicators, and when we looked at our chronic absenteeism, our school culture and climate indicators, those were areas that need attention. And so it's now that we're at a place from an operational perspective that we can say we see how everything aligns. I'll make an example. We were talking, Ms. Brody was talking about the middle school model, and we know that one of the indicators is around first time ninth grade on track. So we get points or we don't get points for the ninth graders that are on track for the first time in ninth grade. And so thinking about how to be so strategic with the summer program that we're trying to develop, right, the bridge program, to how we design the middle schools when we send the kids off. It is now where we're at a point in which we're saying everything is starting to kind of cohere. So that was just a bright point that I wanted to highlight, because I see it even being lifted here in these conversations as well. So.
Okay.
Any more questions?
No.
Okay. So we're really grateful for your presentation. Now, I was asking about money and capacity, and I don't want it to seem like I'm sort of raining on the parade.
Very
Now,
important.
there are a lot of things that we as a board don't always agree on, but community schools is something that I think we're all behind, and we want to see this happen. But I think it's important that we talk about all this so that everyone realizes that we don't just do things and they don't ask us tomorrow, why isn't it done? But we have all this work underlying this that we have to get through. So if there are no more questions, then thank you very much. And I think, yes, ma'am?
Sorry. So can I just take a moment to highlight the fact that March is Board of Education Member Appreciation Month. And so, wait, don't clap yet, because Christina's going to take a video, because we're going to post it on our website. So March is, ready, Christina? So March is Board of Education Appreciation Month, and so we want to thank our board members for their time, their dedication, and their commitment to all of our beautiful and capable students. So we appreciate your leadership. Thank you for all that you do.
So now we are adjourned.